Hey everyone, welcome back to Make It Happen Mondays, where we talk about sales, business, entrepreneurship, personal growth, mental health, and everything in between with guests who I truly respect and I think make a positive impact on the world around us. And today's conversation is with Guy Rubin. He is the CEO of Ebsta, a revenue intelligence platform that guarantees to increase B2B sellers' quota attainment within 6 months. And they just got acquired too, so it was a really cool conversation. And as always, we started the conversation with his background and where he's going. And he started Ebsta self-funded. And I always find that very interesting, like not getting a bunch of VC backing and getting that pressure. So dove into that a little bit and his entrepreneurial itch, where he got it from and how he realized he wasn't really set for corporate, even though now he's acquired and he's got to play well with the acquisition company, but it aligned with his values and direction. So that was really important. And then when you got into, some of the data that they have, they put together a 2025 Sales Qualification Report, and also, a couple of other ones that brought out some really interesting data because their platform sees a lot more than most organizations do, and really honed in on qualification and the importance of qualification and what the best reps do. And some of the data was validating, but also stunning to see in real life, which is, 17% of your top performers produce 80-something%. So there's Pareto's rule, factual. And it got me to ask, what does that leave the other 80% of the reps, especially now in the world of AI, that AI can do it a lot better than most of the reps can. And, I think we are proving right now that we are moving back to full cycle sales. I mean, this data shows it, and what the best reps do, what the best organizations are doing. So we got into a lot of this and this kind of future discussion here of where we are evolving to, with sales reps needing to be more product knowledge and relationship developers and everything else. But this one should be an eye-opening one for you as far as where things are going right now. And I think where we as sales professionals have to elevate to. And it's pretty undeniable, in my opinion, of what's going on right now. Only the strong are going to survive. And only the ones who know how to have business conversations, who can be dynamic and agile enough and help customers buy and get out of the trying to sell you something mentality, and who gives a shit about the features and functions of your stuff. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Sales these days has nothing to do with what you sell. It has everything to do with how you sell. And we got to level up right now because we got to sell a lot better than we have been. So hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Let's make it happen. Guy Rubin, welcome to the Make It Happen Monday podcast, my friend. How you doing today?
John, lovely to see you. It's been too long. Doing very well, thank you.
Yeah, good. Where are you actually calling in from right now?
So I'm in London at the moment. We just got back from DC at the GTM event where I saw you. And our next long haul trip is Dreamforce in October.
So you're going to that. I think this is going to be the first year I skipped Dreamforce. So I've been to it 12 years in a row outside of the COVID year. And I think this will be the first year in 12 or 13 years that I actually missed Dreamforce. So are you guys getting a booth or anything, or are you just going to go work the floor?
We've got planning just to work the floor, but we've actually got an office one block from Moscone, so we're going to be hosting a happy hour and a few kind of customer meetings while we're there as well.
There you go. Those are always my favorites. Like that going. I think there's maybe only been about 2 or 3 years where I've actually gone to the conference itself. Most years, what I do is I love where there's that offsite where people just go and plug in and hang out, grab drinks in a quiet environment. My favorite, those, the W that's right there on the corner of Moscone, right? I sit there at a kind of high top table. I grab the waitress and I give her like $300. And I'm like, I'm just going to be here for a few hours here. And I just want you to keep bringing water and keep bringing chips and guac. And so everybody I know just cycles through the W and they sit down for a few minutes. We have a conversation. Then somebody else comes. I have another conversation. So I get like 50 meetings done in the 3 hours and get the most value out of it and barely spend a dime. So it's my favorite way of managing Dreamforce.
Yeah, I hear you. It can be carnage. I think they're expecting over 150,000 people. It's insane.
Did they go up that high again? Because I remember
Yeah.
they were there at 2018. It was 150. They had brought 2 cruise ships in because there weren't enough hotel rooms, and it was absurd. I actually, after that, I swore it off. I was like, I'm never coming back to this because this is misery. But then Dreamforce kind of course corrected it, and it was down to like 50 or 60,000, but it's back up to 150 again.
I mean, that's what I was told, but we'll have to wait and see until we get there. But yeah, that's my understanding. So it is carnage.
Oh, then I'm glad I'm not going. Yeah, sorry. So, but look, guy, we're going to get into a lot of, you got a really cool report that just came out. We're going to talk a lot about discovery right now and the importance of it. Now more than ever. But before we do that, I always love to, audience, get to know you a little bit better, more than what we can read on LinkedIn. So talk to us a little bit about your origin story. I know you're a huge Tottenham Spurs fan. I know you're big out in London, and you split your time between the two. You got a wife and a couple of kids here, but talk to me a little bit about kind of growing up and where you caught the bug, if you will, like parents and the entrepreneurship bug, because you started Ebsta fully, without any funding on your own, bootstrapping it. So we'll get to that, but I want to figure out where that itch came from. So talk to me a little bit about how you grew up.
Well, I was never particularly academic. So I left school quite early. My father insisted I go and get a real job. And so I went through the journey of qualifying as an accountant, which I hated, but at least I learned how to read a balance sheet. As soon as I qualified, I stepped away from that. And I always enjoyed technology. And I got into an ecosystem around recruitment tech. So that really got me into the space. I ran a business called iProfile for 7 years. In that space, I was involved with a couple of other businesses that had M&A in and around the recruitment tech space, and then realized that I wasn't very good at being an employee, and decided to go off on our own. And so I joined with a friend of mine at the time, and we set up the business that became Ebsta. And that was what, 12 years ago now.
Love it. Talk to me a little bit about when you realized that you weren't really cut out for corporate. Because I think there's I've had a couple of conversations recently about, the difference between being an entrepreneur and being somebody who likes startups versus somebody who, fits into the corporate culture. And I was one who did not fit into the corporate culture, even though I didn't know it. Something just didn't feel right to me. And then I thought I was an entrepreneur, but I wasn't, because I just joined a small business that my buddy started, who was the entrepreneur. And then I kind of went off on my own, i.e. becoming an entrepreneur. So, I think the audience of sales professionals always has kind of some type of entrepreneurial spirit to us. So walk us through kind of your journey of realizing like this doesn't feel right. Like, was it something specific that you noticed that you didn't just enjoy about the corporate and having other people tell you what to do, or was it just more of an evolution for you?
Well, I need to be a little bit careful because, as you know, a month ago, we sold Ebsta.
Yes.
And Ebsta has now been acquired by a company called Fullcasts, which I'm absolutely enjoying being part of.
Yes, of course. Yeah, but I'm talking early 12 years ago guy, not today guy, 12 years ago guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I think you get to a point in your sales career where you're earning really good money, and you look forward and think, well, how am I going to continue on this trajectory? How am I going to continue my learning, my development, and my earning potential? Because I think, once you start earning good money as a salesperson, you've got a lot of pressure to maintain. And it can get increasingly difficult. You try and sell larger and larger ticket items, and it can, you've got the number of places you can go to continue on that path diminishes. And at the same time, you get the itch because you think you've got a big ego because you're in sales, and you think you can do everything better and easier than everybody else. So I suppose it was the combination of those two things where I felt that there was a big opportunity and I wanted to take control of my own destiny. I wasn't, I enjoyed making the decisions. I want to be in charge and control a lot. And while that sounds attractive, the buck always stops with you, right? And at our peak, we had 65 people in the business, and that's 65 families that are eating every month because you're running payroll. So, every issue that comes in is your issue. Ultimately, the buck stops with you. we've had over 50,000 companies use our platform over the years, and so understanding the challenges and there's always a problem, there's always an emergency, there's always a code red that you need to deal with. Trying to stay present through all of that is important, and also getting the right leadership team around you so that you don't have to make every decision. It's kind of some of the lessons I've learned over the years.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I was not so good at was not making every or actually probably delegating too many decisions, and kind of the accountability factor was probably my biggest falter of building a business was the system and the structure in place to hold each other accountable as we grew, because as growth and success hides a lot of warts. And then when the shit hits the fan, you find out really where your processes fall and where your alliances fall as well. So that was my learning lesson in 2023. So for context here, what is Ebsta? Talk to the audience about what is Ebsta, and then I want to back into why you started it.
Yeah, so we sit in this world we call revenue intelligence. So our customers are all B2B organizations. More often than not, we find businesses where they're struggling to accurately forecast, and perhaps only a small proportion of the sellers are consistently hit quota. So what you tend to find is 15, 20% of the sellers are overachieving, and then everybody else, you've got this kind of long tail of underperforming sellers. And what we've got really good at is understanding what those top performers are doing at every stage of the sales cycle, and using that to prompt the B players so that they're able to replicate best practice. And very quickly, when everyone's doing things in a consistent way, you see an uplift. And a byproduct of that is a more accurate forecast. So we do all of that inside Salesforce, and we've got a unique approach to unlocking the data that you've got sitting in silos like mailboxes, calendars, phone systems, CRM. And then we have a services wrapper that actually supports the customer base to understand what they need to prioritize to get more of their sellers hit quota. And I personally meet with all of the C-suite of our customers every quarter, walk them through this kind of 50-page report we produce, we call Revenue Insights as a Service. And it's a great way of them kind of getting an audit of everything that's gone on in their business on the go-to-market side, and understanding where the low-hanging fruit is. And more often than not, the usual stuff that we see time and time again is things like not enough adherence to the sales process. So the stages are not being adhered to correctly. The gates between the triggers, the triggers and gates between the stages are not as strong as they should be. People are skipping stages. We see a lot of issue with late stage close lost opportunities when actually the issue relates to early stage qualification. And that actually prompted us to produce a report last month we call the Qualification Report, where we've analyzed 650,000 opportunities and looking at how well or badly they've been qualified and the influence that has on win rates.
So I was going to ask another question, but let me dive into that for a second, because I'm curious on the stages piece of this. Sales stages always crack me up, because the client doesn't give a shit about the sales stages. It's the buying process, right? Nobody cares about our sales process. And I have, traditional, obviously companies have certain stages, like they have the discovery stage in their sales process, and which I always laugh at. I'm like, oh, okay, so that means you stop asking questions. Good job. Or the negotiation stage of the process. It's like, oh, okay, so you think negotiation starts at the end. Great. I guarantee you using discounts. So talk to me a little bit about the value of having sales stages, but how they now adapt to the buying cycle, and how do you marry those two? And then how do you condition sales reps or uncondition them by creating a different type of sales stage model here? Because I just fundamentally don't believe in, okay, you're at this stage, and so therefore you have to move to this. Yes, there are criteria, exit criteria, and all that other stuff, but you're now coming in and out. There's 15 different buyers. You're slowing down, you're speeding up. Like, so how is a sales stage process relevant in today's market with the buyer having most of the power?
Yeah, really good questions there, John. So look, first of all, the data backs up a lot of what you're saying. What we saw nearly 50% of businesses move to a full cycle sales motion. where sellers now have at least some responsibility for top of funnel lead gen and continue to hold the customer after the deals are signed. And if you ask me, I'm looking at the data for next year already, and the early indicators are that we're seeing even more than 50% of businesses move to that model, and which is a big departure, right? We all grew up on the Salesforce sales model where you've got these single purpose vehicles doing individual stages. And the biggest problem, as you picked up rightly so, is that might work for a sales process, but my goodness, it doesn't work for a buying process. And it just so happens that the buyer is quite important in the sales in the sales cycle. So I buy into what you're saying, and the data is showing that we're seeing more sellers own much more of that customer journey. It kind of makes sense, right? You get to a point where you built enough confidence and trust with the customer. They sign a contract. It seems crazy to then let that relationship go. So I buy into the points that you're making. I think the thing with, and I also smile at some of the points you made there earlier. Well, without discovery, I'm no longer curious. And funnily enough, one of the interesting data points we saw is that those top performers, that the solution or product they anticipate they're selling the customer in the early stages changes more often than not by the time they get to the end of the sales process, while the B players end up sticking to their guns and not really being agile enough to understand what client's requirements are. I think the way we're seeing, so first of all, it's not unusual to find a business that's got too many stages. Like with qualification, right? The simpler, the better. So that's always a pushback. If you are seeing people that are skipping stages, do you really need as many stages as you've got? I think, look, what do we see in the data? There's a couple of things. Qualifying out early makes a difference. And getting really ruthless about that. The top performers are qualifying out over a third of their opportunities at those very early stages. So, being picky about who we spend our time with is really, really important. And then thinking about the stage progression, more about the resources that you're going to pull in to the business, right? So having a conversation with your buyer about the fact that, look, our win rates are twice as high when we get the finance persona involved in building the business case rather than just presenting it back, for example. It's okay to say to the buyer, look, if you won't give me access to the finance persona, I can't go any further in this process right now, right? I need to bring in solution engineers. I might need to bring in legal. I might need to bring in all sorts of other resources. I only get access to those resources when I can show my leader, my sales leader, that I've got X amount of buy-in, or I'm multi-threaded with certain personas. And it's okay to push back and have those difficult conversations because you're able to very quickly qualify out deals where perhaps the right time to re-engage is in 6 months' time. So I think there's a lot of value in having stages in place to make sure that we are getting the right engagement with the right stakeholders. And we're asking the right type of questions. I agree with you. Qualification doesn't even finish when the deal's signed, right? We need to keep being curious. But there are different types of questions we need to ask of different personas at different stages. And I think giving the sellers some structure so that they know that, right, once you've got to this line in the sand, you can keep supporting that resource, but we're not allowed to go into the next stage or progress or bring in other resources to the project until we got commitments from the customer.
So how does that marry with like the sales rep? Because there's a nuance here, right? And it goes back to, and I'm going to relate this to discounting as an example, right? Some sales reps maintain the power of discounting so that they are the ones in power of like negotiating with the client, right? So instead of, hey, I got to go talk to my boss about this, let me work with you on this. And then there's others who use the boss as, hey, you and I are on the same page here over, like, I'm fighting for you. I got to go fight for my boss. So can you give me something to go help fight for my boss? So effectively what you're saying there is like that intermediary of like, hey, help me help you. Like, I want to get to this next stage. And in order for me to do that, I need to get some information from you. So therefore I can share with my internal team here. So I guess the nuance of this I'm curious about is the power, if you will, of the sales professional and kind of giving up some of that power, and using it as leverage versus using the power themselves so the client sees them. So you know what I'm talking about there, that kind of slight nuance of I have control and I can kind of get you what you need, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, versus, hey, I got to go get what you need and I need some stuff from you to be able to do that. How does that, from a psychological standpoint, impact the perception from the client?
I suppose my gut feel on that is that the more complex the deal, the more stakeholders you want involved on both sides. And any excuse to get multi-threaded and to get your own C-suite involved in the sales process and get them touching not just the C-suite at the customer or prospects, but also maybe the PE house that owns that business. Getting buy-in and really understanding. I'm preaching to the converted, right? We're talking about value selling, right? And ultimately, when it comes down to price and negotiation, it really comes down to the question is whether have we proved enough value? Are we selling to value? And too often we all see people jumping in to show people, to show off the buttons and the features. And in reality, they're almost irrelevant. It was really fascinating. We were both at the GTM event last week, and I don't know if you got as kind of pitch weary as I did, but every time you speak to someone, it's like, "Hi, how are you doing? And what do you do?" And you get this kind of this elevator pitch, and more often than not, they're so proud of their buttons and their features, and in reality, all I want to hear about is how can you positively influence my life, right? How can you have a big impact on my world? And I'll go and have a look at the buttons in meeting 3 or 4. Right? We'll get there, right? But for now, I just need to understand, the value you can deliver me and who else I know that you've delivered value to, so that I get some confidence that it's worth us having this conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. So my whole presentation was, I called it anything but predictable. And it was how I personally think that the predictable revenue model broke sales. And I think it did us all a disservice, quite frankly. And the segmentation of roles took away the art of sales and over-scienced it in so many ways. And then, kind of getting into the trade show about how none of these reps actually know how to sell anymore. They don't know how to have a conversation. And I use the example of just go out to the trade booths right now. Go out to those booths and see what type of conversations you get into versus how many pitches you get. And I gave the very simple, tip, and I always give this to reps. I was like, when somebody comes up and asks, "What do you guys do?" Don't jump into your stupid pitch. Nobody gives a shit. Ask them or say something to the effect of, "Hey, we do a lot of stuff. Let me ask you real quick. What kind of company do you work for? And what role are you in that company?" And then just with that basic information, you could say, "Well, typically for people like you in companies like that, these are the problems we solve versus here's all the shit that we do." Just that simple, thing alone will differentiate you over 95% of the sales professionals at these booths who are just pitching, and they all sound exactly the same. They all have AI now. It used to be platforms. It used to be cloud. It used to be e-commerce. Like, it's literally the same pitch across the board. And it's just, I'm very concerned now with something that you brought up, which I know is true, and I know it's been true, is the 80-20 rule. Is that 20% of your reps are driving 80% of your revenue. You've proved it out with the model here. And I'm curious from your and what you're seeing, what does that mean for the other 80% of the reps here? Because I believe with AI, before AI, that 80% kind of, it was what it was. We accepted mediocrity, we accepted average, we accepted the laggards. And it just was what it was. You know what I mean? But now with AI being able to do all of that far better than average reps ever could. I told reps, if you don't think you have a problem right now, go into ChatGPT and pretend like you're a potential client. Be like, "Hey, I'm a CEO, a VP of sales of a 50-person sales team. I'm looking at the JB sales training. Tell me what I need to know," right? And you will realize in 5 minutes, you get more value out of that than you did some 22-year-old kid who's going to ask you dumb BANT questions, and then an AE who's going to drone through a piece of shit demo. So I guess with what you're saying and what you're seeing with the data, what happens to those 80% of those reps?
Yeah, this is the next industrial revolution we're experiencing, and if you'd asked me 3 years ago, it was the narrative was very clear. We're going to help you get your B players up to A player standard or as close as we can. Now the narrative is different. The narrative is if after their ramps they're still B players, they shouldn't be in your organization, and that's what we're experiencing. And actually filling up the A players diary back to back is really where we're at now. And look, at least at the moment, AI is not very good at building relationships, running a sales cycle, and closing your business, or building trust with the customer. But everything else the sellers are responsible for, the AI does it 100 times better, right? We now have the ability to, when we onboard a customer, we're able to go through the last, say, 10,000 hours of sales calls in a day. And we go back through every opportunity that's closed, won, and lost, who you might think that you lost that deal late stage. And we're looking back at the qualification and scoring how good or badly we did. And we start to look at patterns, and you'll see certain sellers are really bad at a certain part of the med pick or whatever it might be. And they're the ones that are losing late stage. And that was all hidden in these silos, in the call data, in the mailboxes, and so on. And now we're able to unlock that information and make it and log every time they do a discovery call how well they've qualified it. And at the end of every call, they get a green thumbs up or a red thumbs down as to whether they've done enough to progress to the next stage. And we don't need to teach them more than that, because they just want to get their red thumbs down to green thumbs up, and therefore they'll teach themselves. And the reality is that teaching sellers how to qualify correctly is a whole set of skills. Teaching them to record that information consistently in the system of record is a completely different set of skills. And AI can pick that stuff up really quickly and can make our top performers have a lot more capacity to run faster. But if you're asking me my prediction, I've been looking at tech recently that allows the buyer to go through more and more of that sales process, even complex B2B sales processes, without engaging with the seller. They can build a business case online through the website, not even your website. There are now aggregators that will go, okay, you're looking for a revenue intelligence platform. There are 5 out there. Give us these data points. We'll build you a business case. We'll tell you which one we think is right for you. And as a seller, you're not even involved in that conversation. I think we'll see more and more of the sales process being done online. I think buyers, depending on what they're buying, more and more of the buyers want to do more of that sales process on their own. And I think leaning into community, leaning into networks, leaning into trusted partners is where the conversion rates are going to get really high, because they're the ones as your advocates. They're your advocates. They're out there in the market, and they're the ones that your customers are asking more and more as to who they should go and talk to, who they should go and work with. I think sales is going to be going through a massive transformation. And like with all of these processes, there'll be some winners and some losers.
I think more losers than winners, quite frankly. And so how about this on product knowledge, right? Because I used to say that sales reps didn't need to be the product experts, because they were more the quarterbacks, right? Where they just bring the pieces in place. I've now flipped my opinion on that. I now think that sales reps need to go pretty deep, because if I can't, the days of, I don't know, let me go figure that out for you, are gone. Because obviously, and there's a lot of other deal killers here, but time is biggest killer. So the more time you allow between interactions, the less likely a deal is to close. So if I have to tell you, Guy, let me get back to you in about a week on that one, because I got to figure it out, I got to talk to my internal team, you've probably already lost them. So I guess which again begs the question here, the value of the sales professional, because I look at it as, if I'm a even curious and somewhat educated buyer, and I can jump into ChatGPT and I can say, hey, I don't even need those aggregators. I could just use my own personalized GPT, for crying out loud, and say, hey, here's our 12 to 24 month business plan. We're looking at these solutions. Give me the top 3 vendors in these areas, right? And so I can do so much work on my own, and this time faster than ever, right? Before it used to be, and I know that stat everybody overuses. By the time somebody comes to us, they're already 60 to 70% of the way through the sales process, blah, blah, blah. That was for inbound, right? Everybody used that for outbound including. And I'm like, no, it's purely for inbound. But now I'm actually aligning that with outbound as well, because if you call me, like say I get a cold call from a sales rep and it's even remotely interesting to me, and there's a follow-up scheduled call in 2 or 3 days, literally 5 minutes before that phone call, I can jump into ChatGPT and say, what do I need to know about this? Does this align? Do I care? What questions should I ask? And when I get on the phone with that sales rep, if I am not getting value out of that conversation that I can't get out of ChatGPT, I don't know what the point of that conversation is. So I'd rather talk to an engineer. I'd rather talk to a customer success person who isn't trying to sell me on anything, but is trying to help me buy. So how does that play with where we're going right now?
Look, a couple of things. I think, first of all, the buyer is always right. And what we're finding is, and I saw again some really interesting tech where you can request your meeting. When you're on someone's website, maybe you're building a business case, maybe you're asking some intelligent AI questions, and now you want to engage. That the most innovative companies are then asking, well, who would you like to talk to? Do you want to talk to a solution engineer? Do you want to talk to a salesperson? Maybe you want to talk to a customer, right? And maybe the customers are willing to give up, half an hour a month and take a call every now and again. And giving the prospects that opportunity to have those conversations, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a differentiator. However, I also I'm a student and an advocate of the sales profession. And I absolutely believe that relationships still drive revenue. And I think that the things that we know well, we just assume other people find really easy. And I think in reality, our buyers don't spend their lives buying our thing. And I think we're experts at helping them to go through that exercise, and not just to buy those licenses, but to achieve those outcomes. And I think I still think there's a place for value selling. I still think there's a place for relationship based engagements, and coming across as that professional that understands your ecosystem and your market. Do you need to understand the gotchas, the ecosystem, the market, the what's going on? Absolutely. I still think we can do well with solution engineers that can help us push the buttons. I actually quite like the idea that sellers are not as in the weeds with the buttons, because I think they can get very lost instead of building that relationship and talking to them about value and the gotchas they need to be aware of and the timeline to return on investment and so on. They can get into pushing the buttons. Isn't it great this one flashes? And you've got this big red button here as well. It just doesn't matter, right? And I think it's kind of below the sales resources kind of requirements. The more they know, the better. But I think there's an opportunity for them to be elevated by having that relationship and adding value. One of the really interesting data points we looked at this year was the right-hand side of the bow tie. So it was the first time we'd really gone in deep on that, and we saw some great stats. So, for example, I'm a big fan of QBRs, and if you do them right.
I was going to say, please tell me how you do them right, because most of them are just drone through data that nobody cares about.
Well, here's the test, okay? If the last 2 QBRs before your renewal are done at C level, you are 7 times more likely to open up a cross-sell, upsell opportunity with a 45% win rate.
Nice.
If the last 2 QBRs are done below the C-suite, you're 4 times more likely to churn the customer.
Wow,
that's why it matters.
Wow.
Okay. Now let's talk about what the QBR needs to be, or more importantly, what it's not. Okay. The QBR is not an opportunity to talk about training or enablement or how the buttons are working or why something went down a month ago. Okay. The QBRs should be a strategic session where you add value to the C-suite, where you give them content that they can use at their board, where you're helping them to justify the business case or helping them to prove out why they need to go in a certain direction. Okay. And if you do that, they'll turn up at the next QBR. And if you don't, if it's tactical, you'll never see them again. Right. And it was so important to us that our platform's got all sorts of insights in it. I mean, a lot of insights, right? We can tell you what level of coverage each rep needs to hit quota. We can tell you how well they're qualifying, how many days in stage. I mean, how multi-threaded they are. You can imagine there's a lot of data. Our whole platform's delivered inside Salesforce, and we sell to mid-market. So if you're turning over 100 million and you're the C-suite, you probably don't even have a Salesforce login, right? And so we're delivering all this value to the sellers and the managers, but the C-suite weren't getting the value from the platform. And so what we did was we took all of the insights in the platform and turned it into a beautifully presented PDF. And every quarter, I would sit down and walk the C-suite through an audit of their whole go-to-market motion, highlighting all the things that have gone well and all the things that needed attention. And none of these insights were not already in our platform, okay? And when I tell you this has been a game changer for our business, because suddenly I'm now having intelligent conversations about how they can achieve their outcomes. What are they looking for? They want to grow faster. They want more of their sellers hit quota. They want a more accurate forecast. And I'm giving them a 50-page report every 3 months on how they can achieve that outcome. Every single quarter, I turn up at that QBR, more of the C-suite are there. Okay? And all of a sudden, I'm getting invited to do their kickoffs, right? Because I'm now a strategic subject matter expert that they want supporting them, rather than just another supplier trying to talk to them about buying some more licenses. So get strategic in your QBRs. It's a huge opportunity to build that relationship with your customers. And this is where we as professionals should be able to level up, because AI is taking away the burden.
And that's, I think, the key and that's also why I think from a business acumen standpoint, I tell reps, I actually just posted it today with a podcast that I did previously where, I think the number one skill that sales reps should focus on is business acumen. Like, forget about the techniques, forget about all that stuff's fine and dandy. But if you can't have a business conversation about the outcomes that the client is looking to achieve and align with those priorities, you're not even going to get a chance to have the conversation at this point, especially at the C-suite, especially at that executive level, right? Because to your point, you got to learn how to speak the language of executive versus, what most people are very comfortable with, which is kind of the people below the power line and people who aren't really engaged in making those decisions.
Absolutely. And, get curious. What are the other 7 projects they've got on right now? And what's the ROI on those? And who's asking for them? Because you might find out very quickly that this is exactly what they need, but in 6 months' time.
Uh-huh.
And if you stand up and say, look, those 7 projects sound really powerful and important, my gut feel is this is something we should revisit in 6 months. You are going to get that callback, right? They're going to respect you, and you're that subject matter expert on whatever it is, that thing you're doing, and that they're going to want to engage with, rather than some annoying salesman that wants to show them how the buttons work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you can literally watch the disengagement. If you watch calls on whatever your call recording software is, you can as an executive watching a sales rep to an executive, you could almost pinpoint the exact moment where the executive just checks out and says, this is not valuable to me, I'm no longer here. And they either genuinely just leave the conversation, depending on how many people are in it, or they mentally leave the conversation and start checking their emails or whatever it might be. And that's why it's very hard for me to watch call recordings of when I had reps. It was very hard for me to watch because I was like, oh, there it is. And I wanted to jump into the conversation, even though it was a recording, and be like, oh God, stop. You missed it. Just shut up. There was the hook, right?
Just ask that question. That's all you needed to do. Just stop there and ask.
And just shut up.
They told you they want the next meeting. Stop talking.
Yes. Yeah. It's there's a beautiful, you ever seen Moneyball right? Remember that scene when he gets what he wants, he just hangs up on him and Jonah's like, what the hell? He's like, when you get what you want, hang up. Stop talking. I believe that wholeheartedly. So there was a couple of stats that stood out to me on this report that I just can't imagine. Here's one. 36% of deals, only 36% of deals have a qualification score and notes post-discovery. So after a discovery call, they don't even fucking take notes and put them in the system on legitimate opportunities.
Look, if I'm going to try and defend the undefensible,
please.
You've got sellers moving from one meeting to the next. And they are, and what you find is that perhaps the less busy, the lower performers might spend lots of time making lots and lots of notes, but that doesn't mean that they've qualified the customer well enough. And the problem with asking sellers to mark their own homework to effectively score their own qualification is you end up with wildly different results. Okay, so you might speak French fluently, but actually, when it comes to writing essays in French, you might miss out the odd word. So you might consider yourself an intermediate French speaker, right? While I went to a school where I had some French classes, and I passed a junior exam in French as a 16-year-old, and I consider myself an intermediate French speaker. They're wildly different, right? And so allowing people to judge their own or score their own qualification is a challenge. And what AI is really good at is that consistency of pulling out the right information around the qualification and scoring it. And what we need to do as leaders is set some bars around that qualification scoring and the capturing of that information, and so that the AI can tell us if where we could do better. And the beautiful thing is, if you've got 100 sellers and they've all run a dozen sales processes every month, you can go back a year and you've got thousands and thousands of examples where you can see patterns around certain sellers are really good at the med but bad at the pick, or good at identifying the economic buyer, but really bad at highlighting, some sort of critical event that they need to work towards. So you can understand where they need training. And again, it takes away all of what you want as a leadership team is a system of record or a data source that everyone trusts, that all of the outcomes, all of the data that we're digesting from it, everyone buys into. And when a machine's maintaining it, you get to that point. Instead of spending your whole lives arguing, well, that data's not right anyway, I don't believe it, and therefore, you're down a rabbit warren and you're having the wrong conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, to me, where AI, I think the biggest benefit moving forward, a lot of people are chasing top of funnel stuff, and I just think that's a fool's errand. It's coaching. It's frontline coaching, because one of the things I said in my presentation at Pavilion was, and I've said this before, it kind of ruffled a few feathers, is like, I wish we would just stop trying to make managers coaches. I just wish we would stop. I've seen people try for 30 years as being in this industry, and managers are usually the top reps who get promoted to be managers for no other reason than they're the top reps. They can't explain what they do. Then they're not sales reps barely get trained. Managers get almost no training on how to be a manager. Forget about how to be a coach. And then they don't get any time to coach. I always laughed at the call recording stuff. It's like, oh, okay, great. I got 10 reps reporting to me. I got to listen to a call recording for and each rep has 3 to 5 calls minimum a week. And so I have to listen to those and then coach. Like, that's a full-time job in and of itself. And don't tell me that you can listen to it on 1.5x because there's tonality, there's all these different things. And don't tell me you could just skip to the part where they talk about pricing because what they said at minute 5 probably dictated what is said at minute 25. So no, I have to listen to a 30-minute call and then do 15 minutes of coaching. So every single one of them is 45 minutes, which I just don't have the time to do. And plus, when I give you that feedback, it's subjective by nature, and you might not think I like you. So all of a sudden, no matter how direct and honest and helpful my feedback is, you might, because you don't think I like you as your boss, you'd be like, whatever, John doesn't like me. And then you're going to go tell HR, and now I'm in 15 meetings. So like, that disaster just continues to happen. And I think the biggest benefit is collecting the data from the call objectively, and then spitting it back to the rep, to your point of like a thumbs up and thumbs down. So how do you coach on that with the human versus the tech? So you're gathering all this information, you got great insights, you're giving reps like, good, you did a good job, you did a bad job. Talked a little bit about self-correcting because of that, but where does like the actual coaching of what to do as it relates to success for your business, where does that come in?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there to unpack, right? I think the very best businesses are at best coaching on deals. They're not coaching the team. They're not doing proper enablement has almost disappeared, and it's a challenge, especially considering there's more and more people working remotely. I don't know about you, John, but if I hadn't had that opportunity to sit in an office for 10 years with other sellers, I would certainly not be the man I am today. So I think that's a real challenge. I think that from our perspective, we don't. It's all for us. It's all about introducing consistency. You're running a sales team of 50 to 150 sellers. Maybe you've got a success team as well that's doing a similar go-to-market motion, looking after the customers. How do we introduce consistency? Because we're not always going to get it right. But if we've got consistency, then and we've got the data, we can run experiments and course correct really quickly. And we know if we can work out what good looks like, we've got a decent chance of replicating that. But and so I think the answer to your question is that the data it's not hard, but there aren't any shortcuts. So step one, we need good quality, consistent, maintained, up-to-date data that underpins everything. Okay. If you don't do that, and most businesses skip that stage, we find on average nearly 70% of companies' active relationships of prospects and accounts, customers and prospects that they're talking to, never make it into that system of record. Okay. So if you don't even have everyone you're talking to in one place, let alone the activity and the engagement and the qualification, and if you're not capturing everything in a consistent format, you're not even at the races. Okay. I mean, apart from having 3 or 4 sellers around the same table, there's just no way of coaching that. Okay. So step one, you need an engine in place that can fix the historical data and gives you confidence as a leadership team that the data is going to continue to be maintained without the sellers having to do any work. Once we've got the data, then we need to convert it into insights. Right. So we need to know how many go-to-market motions have we got, how many different products are we selling to different verticals, different geographies, and what does good look like? Okay. So from our side, we've seen we need at least 50 close one outcomes for us to be able to do that benchmarking. So we won 50 deals. We go back through all the historical traffic, all those call recordings, all that email activity and meetings that took place, and we go back and fix those 50 deals. So when you look in Salesforce, it might only have one contact and 3 emails associated to it. But then once we finish fixing it, it turns out that the buying committee was actually 9 stakeholders and there were 250 interactions during the 5-stage sales process. Now, when we fix it not for one deal, the last 1,000 deals, we start to see patterns. And you start to see what good practice looks like. How many days should we spend in this stage before the win rate starts to drop? What happens when we get this particular persona versus that persona actively involved at different stages? And it starts to become easy to see. Then as we start turning this into insights, what we found works really well is converting it all into pictures that an 11-year-old can understand. Right? And I've got an 11-year-old, so I'm able to use it as a test. Right? And if you can get it into a picture that everyone could buy into, suddenly, and everyone believes the data that underpins it, now you can start having interesting conversations. Because that seller who's got a really big ego, lots of spiky hair, maybe a big tie, is telling you how they know everything and they know what they're doing. You show, look, your win rate's 12%, okay? But your peers are hitting a 38% win rate. And the only differences are they always engage the finance persona at stage 2 and they get an engagement level above 67. So how about we do that at stage 2 moving forward, right? Now, all of a sudden, it was their idea, right? Because guess what? However big their ego is, they still want to win. And when you can show it to them in black and white, simple pictures that shows this is how you win, and at the same time take away all their admin burden and give them confidence that the data this stuff is relating to is correct and accurate, now they're interested. Now their ears are open. And for us, delivering those insights on the opportunity record back in Salesforce means we're going back. We're asking them to digest that where they're spending time anyway.
Nice. Yeah, I think the rinse repeat, right, of the constant of evaluation of those indicators. Also because things change quite a bit now as well. Like, I mean, buying committees change, more people are involved, and I've never seen sales change and move as fast as it is right now. And without a system of record maintaining and collecting all that information and constantly analyzing, it's kind of hard to make any real decisions moving forward, which is why I think so many companies are in trouble right now, because I thought personally that AI was going to solve kind of the garbage in, garbage out problem, right? Like of all your bad data, I was figuring, oh, AI, just go in there and make it nice and pretty, and and now everything's going to be great, and it's still garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't have the right inputs, it's still going to give you shitty data no matter what you do. And so getting that tight, and that's why I think cleaning things up first, cleaning up your stale stages, simplifying the process, making sure that you understand kind of the indicators here is step one, because it's been so overcomplicated to this point that reps don't follow it, or they skip stages, or they sandbag because it's just not worth putting that information in there at this point.
Yeah, and it's like going to the gym, right? It's not one and done. Unfortunately, you don't get your 6-pack the first time you go, right?
Yeah, I wish.
You and me both. But incremental improvements achieves exponential results. And as I say, going through this exercise we've now done this with over 300 companies, and it's incredible to see how quickly you can see a change, and getting more sellers hit quota is within your control, but it's not hard, but there are no shortcuts.
Yeah, I love it. All right, let's end on this one. The data that was, I talk about this one a lot, but slippage is the silent killer. Right, he says deals slipping past 2 months tank win rates by 113%. Is there any insights that you could bring from that outside of, like, I always say time kills all deals. That's why I do a simple give-get scorecard with my negotiation training. And one of the biggest gives I have on my scorecard is more time to make a decision. And I'm a 3 strikes and you're out person. You want more time once? Okay, whatever. Everybody might need a little bit more time. You want more time twice, or you skip a commit on the second time, we might have to start having a conversation about what's going on here. The third time, I pretty much kill the deal because I know it's dead. So where are you on slippage, if you will, and how can reps kind of pay attention to that slippage and realize how important it is, and then what they can do to expedite or and keep that engagement going so that it doesn't slip?
Well, so first of all, not all deals are equal. Okay, so for example, on some of the larger enterprise deals, slippage doesn't have a negative impact on win rates. Moreover, again, sometimes you find, certainly the larger, more complex deals, the seller might have overestimated or just worked on best case scenario. It might just close by this date, right? And of course, things never work out quite that way. So every business is different, and every business unit is different. And what I would say to those listening is you need to understand the impact of time on win rates for your business. And in particular, are there certain stages that people are getting stuck in? Because it might be that we can do more in that qualification stage. Or we talked earlier about being stronger with the buyer and explaining to them, look, I need 15 minutes of your time, and we need to map out what this process looks like and which stakeholders. Now, normally, when we get to this line in the sand, we need these stakeholders from your side involved. Who would that be from your side? Who holds budget? Who cares? Whose critical event are we actually working towards? That kind of thing. And I think spending that time early on and getting buy-in to a buying process with the buyer is important. And again, having that honest relationship, and keep checking. I'm a big fan of the takeaway, right? Yeah, maybe now's not the right time. Should I just close? I could close this off as lost if you like, and I'll be back in touch in 3 months. It's like, well, actually, maybe that's the right thing to do. Or no, we really are committed to this. We have to get it in and live by, great. Okay, now I know. So ask the right questions up front. Try and get a commitment to a journey before you throw more resource at the project. And the A players are really good at it. They're really, really good at being, look, when they say your time's valuable, what they really mean is my time is valuable. And you've only got so many hours in the day to run sales. And if this particular company doesn't want your help right now, go and help someone else, because there's many people out there that do. So understand the influence of time on win rates for different motions, different stages. Find out where you're slipping. Find out where the gaps might be. It might be that we just need a bit of collateral. Maybe you consistently getting asked about competitors, and then it slows down. Well, can we get the backward cards ready? Or pricing is too complicated. Or find out where things are getting stuck, and then find examples of how they're getting unstuck from the A players. And there's also Don't underestimate the value of multi-threading on both sides. Okay? Getting the C-suite involved on your side is really, it should be table stakes at this point. What I'm seeing that the real innovative players are doing is marketing are starting to work a stage ahead of you. So if we know that at the next stage I need to get engaged with the CFO, the marketing team are already warming them up, right? And these are things that we can do to work as a team, because exactly as you said earlier, we only have one go-to-market team. You can call it SDRs and marketing and sales and A's and solution engineers, but the customer doesn't care.
No, I don't. That's why, I tell, to simplify things, the number one indicator for me that a deal is moving through and I have a chance here is whether they agree to a defined next step, period. Like if the client agrees, and I'd gong data about, next steps and 5 times, top reps and everything else. But very simply put, it's okay, great. When do you want to schedule our next meeting so we can keep going? If they say yes to that, I feel really good about that deal. If they say no, why don't you just follow up in a couple of weeks or in a month or whatever it is? Like I said, the deal's pretty much probably dead. So it's that nuance of just those little small things of disqualifying, of getting that next step, of being upfront with the process and aligned. Like it's funny because none of this is rocket science. It's a lot of it is just fundamentals and core fundamentals, which I started this conversation off. I think we've lost because we've over-scienced the process, and now nobody knows how to actually engage, with the fundamentals of sales, which I hope we get back to sometime here soon, man.
I hear you. I want to pick up finally on one point you raised earlier, just talking about the landscape and what's changing over the next 3 years. Yep. I'm getting a lot of questions, as I'm sure you can imagine, as to why we decided to sell the business and where we got to. And I think when I look ahead, I'd like to think that at Ebsta we're ahead of the game. What we do around fixing data, the way we do our insights, the benchmarks we produce, I'd like to think we're ahead of the game at the moment. But when I look ahead at the market and what's coming, the reality is that the sales tech ecosystem is going to transform over the next 3 years, absolutely transform. And that gives you a few options, right? You can either get niche, get big, or get out. And I want to win. And when I looked at the market, what scared me was knowing was how we were going to win without doing something. And that's really when we looked at whether it was the right thing to us to raise or to join a bigger organization. And I'm delighted to say we decided to join Fullcast. And what's great, they're doing a roll up in this whole space. So they come from territory planning, and I didn't realize how much was involved in territory planning until I got into it. But the way people run territories at the moment on spreadsheets is insane. So really fascinating to see that business case. And then on the other side, they do commissions. So we sit kind of really nicely in the middle. So what they call plan, perform, and pay. So that's kind of the new world we live in. And being part of a bigger team, some incredible leaders there, with a very clear vision of where the future is going, and just feel like we can accelerate a whole lot faster by being part of that.
Love it. Yeah, I think that the consolidation play right now is because I keep looking at it. I cringe for point solution players right now, because I'm just like, this is, we always do this in history, right? We kind of go point solution, and then we go platform, and then we go point solution platform. And right now, the consolidation of point solutions, I scratch my head and I wonder how now, especially with AI, and how fast it is, and how the bigger companies have the money and the tech to do it, how the Microsofts, the Salesforces, don't win, because they can now, instead of cramming some acquisition in and trying to mash it together, now they can just tell AI to make that feature, make that thing. And it'll be a hell of a lot closer to as good as the point solution is than it ever has been. So I think the acquisition play, or the combination of power and coming with a more holistic solution, is the way that most people are going to survive at this point. So well done on the acquisition, and good luck for the future, my friend.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, exciting times ahead, and excited to see how we all progress. But I agree with you. I think the cost of tech has gone through the floor, but the cost to go to market has gone through the ceiling. So, you really have to be part of something bigger if you want to have an impact. There's always exceptions to the rule, but I think in reality, that's where we landed, and you're really excited about being part of something bigger.
Love it, my friend. All right, well, let's tie it up here, Guy. Where can people find out more information about Ebsta, what you're doing, about you, about the report, and everything else?
Yeah, anyone can follow me on LinkedIn. If you mention the podcast or John by name, I'll certainly accept the invite. I've got if people follow me, they'll get. We send out updates every week on the latest insights and benchmarks. So hopefully that content's useful to the community as well. And then if there's a stage out there, I'm probably on it. Delivering content. That's my new role. So you're going to see me out there a lot more, and some hopefully adding value to our community.
Love it. Awesome, Guy. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate the conversation and enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. And as always, like I said at the end of all these podcasts, go out there and make somebody smile today, because no matter how bad your day is going or how bad you think it went, you make somebody smile today, and you had a good day, and the world needs a lot more of that right now. So thank you all very much, and I will see you on the other side. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. With your support and our incredible guests, we're one of the top sales podcasts out there right now, and I can't thank you enough. Now, to keep the momentum going, it would mean the world to me if you could go and leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform and share some of your favorite episodes with your network. Also, I am super excited to be launching my new newsletter, where I'll be sharing everything I know and everything I'm learning along the way while I'm out there selling every day just like you. Go to jbarrows.com/newsletter to sign up today. Let's all level up and make this happen together.